We can't tell how strong they are, but they've opened up deep cracks only about 5 feet from the edge of the volcano.
Tonight, Spirit Lake is no more. That's the word from the Forest Service.
At exactly 8:32 in the morning, on a quiet Sunday in May, a volcanologist sitting on a ridge in Washington state pressed his radio and shouted 5 words.
Vancouver! Vancouver! This is it!
Those were the last words anyone ever heard from him. Seconds later, an entire side of the mountain in front of him collapsed, and what came next was the most destructive volcanic eruption ever recorded in American history.
The fact that the glacier is breaking up on this side of the volcano, on the north side.
And a wall of trees, mud, and fire that erased everything in its path for 230 square miles. This is the story of Mount St Helens. Before May 18, 1980, Mount St Helens was considered one of the most beautiful mountains in North America. People called it the Mount Fuji of America because of its perfect snow-covered cone. It rose 9,677 feet into the sky in southwestern Washington state, deep inside the Cascade Mountain Range. The indigenous tribes of the region had a different name for it. They called it Lawala Clough, which means the smoking mountain. They had stories of it breathing fire. They had warnings passed down for generations about staying away. But by 1980, most people had forgotten those warnings. The mountain had been quiet for 123 years. The last eruption was in 1857, small, harmless, and long forgotten. Around the base of the volcano, life had grown peaceful. There were tourist lodges, summer camps, hiking trails, and dense forests of Douglas fir trees, some over 200 feet tall. Just 5 miles north of the peak sat Spirit Lake, a sparkling blue lake surrounded by cabins, boats, and Boy Scout camps. It looked like paradise. But deep inside Mount St Helens, something had been building for centuries. And in March of 1980, it finally started to wake up.
With a feeling that something was going to happen at the...
On March 20th, 1980, a magnitude 4.2 earthquake struck directly beneath the volcano. It was the first major seismic activity in over 100 years. Then came another. And another. Within days, scientists at the United States Geological Survey were recording hundreds of small earthquakes every single day. On March 27th, the volcano coughed for the first time. A small steam explosion sent ash 7,000 feet into the air and opened a brand new crater at the summit. The government acted quickly. They created a red zone around the mountain and ordered evacuations. Roads were closed. Tourists were turned away. Police set up roadblocks. But not everyone left. One man refused, and his name would become legend. Harry Truman was 83 years old. He had run the Mount St Helens Lodge on the shore of Spirit Lake since 1928. He had lived in the shadow of the volcano for 54 years. When reporters came to ask him why he wasn't leaving, he gave them a now famous answer. If the mountain goes, I'm going with it. Meanwhile, on a small ridge about 6 miles north of the summit, a young geologist named David Johnston was setting up his observation post. He was only 30 years old. He knew the volcano was dangerous. He had told his colleagues just days before that standing this close to Mount St Helens was like standing next to a dynamite keg with the fuse lit. But somebody had to monitor it, and on the night of May 17th, David Johnston volunteered to take the Sunday morning shift. He had no way of knowing it would be his last. Sunday, May 18th, 1980. 8:32 a.m. Pacific Time, a magnitude 5.1 earthquake struck directly underneath the mountain. The pressure inside the volcano had finally cracked the rock, holding it back. And in that single instant, the entire north face of Mount St Helens collapsed. The whole side of the mountain, billions of tons of rock, ice, and earth, broke away and started sliding down, Modern scientists call this a sector collapse. It was the largest landslide ever recorded in human history. The volume of rock that slid down was around 2.5 billion cubic meters. That's enough to fill 1 million Olympic-sized swimming pools. But the landslide was just the beginning. When that wall of rock peeled away, it suddenly uncorked the volcano, like ripping the cap off a shaken bottle of soda. The pressure inside the volcano, which had been building for months, exploded sideways. A lateral blast, sideways, not upward, erupted from the open wound in the mountain. That blast was traveling at over 300 miles per hour. The temperature inside it was around 660 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 350 degrees Celsius, hot enough to instantly kill every living thing it touched. On his ridge 6 miles to the north, David Johnston saw it coming first. He grabbed his radio. He shouted those 5 famous words.
Vancouver! Vancouver! This is it!
And then the blast swept his entire observation post off the side of the ridge. His body was never found. The shockwave kept moving north. Within seconds, it reached the dense old-growth forest. And here's something hard to imagine. The blast was so powerful that 200-foot-tall Douglas fir trees were ripped out of the ground, roots and all, and thrown like matchsticks. In total, over 10 million trees were knocked flat in just a few minutes. From above, the forest looked like someone had combed every single tree to point in the same direction. The blast continued north for another 18 miles, killing everything in its path. While the lateral blast tore through the forest, the avalanche of rock and ice was still moving down the mountain at over 150 miles per hour. It rushed straight into Spirit Lake. The impact was so violent that the entire lake, water, fish, boats, everything was pushed 700 feet up the side of the surrounding mountains. Then it came crashing back down. When the water settled, Spirit Lake was 200 feet higher than it used to be. And buried somewhere underneath all that mud, rock, and ash was Harry Truman, his lodge, his 16 cats, and everything he had ever owned. He had been right. The mountain went, and he went with it. Then came the ash. A second eruption column shot straight up from the volcano's new crater. Within 15 minutes, it had reached a height of 80,000 feet, about 15 miles into the sky. That's nearly 3 times higher than commercial airplanes fly. The ash kept coming for the next 9 hours. Strong winds pushed the cloud east, and within hours, ash began falling on 11 different U.S. states and parts of Canada. The city of Yakima, Washington, 60 miles away from the volcano, went completely dark in the middle of the day. Streetlights came on at noon. People wore masks just to breathe. Meanwhile, all that snow and ice on the volcano had melted instantly. It mixed with rock and dirt to form something even more deadly. A lahar. A lahar is a volcanic mudflow, and these mudflows raced down the rivers around Mount St Helens at 100 miles per hour. They destroyed bridges, swept away homes, and dumped debris all the way into the Columbia River, nearly 50 miles away. By the time the day ended, 57 people were dead. The mountain itself had lost 1,300 feet of its height. The perfect cone was gone. In its place stood a giant, horseshoe-shaped crater facing north, a permanent scar that you can still see today. To understand just how powerful the Mount St Helens eruption truly was, you have to look at the numbers. The total energy released was equal to 26 megatons of TNT. For comparison, that's 1,100 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima in 1945. The economic damage was massive, over $1.1 billion in 1980, which is around $3.5 billion today. More than 200 homes were destroyed. Around 185 miles of highway were ruined. Hundreds of bridges were swept away. And the ash buried thousands of cars, blocked sewer systems, and grounded planes across the entire western United States for weeks. But the most heartbreaking numbers are the human ones. Among the 57 victims were ordinary people doing ordinary things on a Sunday morning. A couple watching the eruption from what they thought was a safe distance, 25 miles away. A photographer named Reed Blackburn, who was working for National Geographic, found in his car after the blast. Another photographer named Robert Landsberg, who took his final photos as the ash cloud raced toward him, then placed his camera under his body to protect the film so the world would still see what he saw. His photos survived. He did not. Roughly 7,000 large animals also died: deer, elk, bears, and millions of fish, birds, and small mammals across the blast zone. Today, Mount St Helens is still active. A new dome is slowly growing inside the crater, rebuilding what was destroyed. Scientists watch it 24 hours a day from the David Johnston Observatory, named in honor of the young geologist who shouted those final 5 words. The forest around the volcano is slowly returning. New trees grow. Wildlife has come back. Spirit Lake is blue again, even though Harry Truman's Lodge still lies somewhere beneath it, buried under 150 feet of rock. Mount St Helens taught the world a brutal lesson, that even a sleeping giant can wake up. And when it does, no science, no warning system, no government can fully stop what comes next. The mountain is quiet today. But quiet is not the same as safe.